Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond, broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
Back at you, Gloves Off. I'm Paul Buitron. I'm here with Senior Master in Kempo, Tim Bulot. And we've been friends for a very long time. You know, my brother from another mother, if you want to take it that way, especially in the Kempo world, you meet folks and they become your family and your friends. But we'll talk a little bit of history for you all that do not know Master Bulot, and we'll take it from there a little bit, and then we'll discuss what I want to discuss, and that is the theme of self-defense and what happens if you come across it. How we doing today, brother? You doing good?
We're doing good. We're doing good. How about yourself?
Doing good. You're looking good.
I appreciate you having us on, Paul.
No, thank you for doing it. And what better person to talk about this? You know, we've been doing martial arts for many years, at least 30 years easy. Many people join martial arts for either they got bullied in school,
right,
or they got in a fight and they lost, or now it's kind of changed into many variants, from fitness to fellowship to camaraderie but the main theme is self-defense usually comes around.
Right.
Let's talk about your experience and of what you've done, and then we'll talk about the self-defense aspect of it.
Right. So you've already said it. I got bullied in school. So back in when I started, Paul, it was during the era where they started busing kids to the other schools because the idea of integrating us was supposed to be a good thing. So I went to a school, was bused to a school, okay, that was a little bit out of my element, and I became a target, so to speak, really, really quick. And I was young, and this went on for years, okay. And so by the time I was 12, I was already, beginning to study, and my family moved around a lot back then. So I kind of bounced around from place to place, eventually settling in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But yeah, that's the bullying is what, and it went beyond bullying back then. I mean, it was outright, getting pummeled by 4 and 5 attackers at the same time. Just one guy holding you, they got beating you mercilessly, taking everything you got, change out of your pockets, bicycles, everything. So and then on later, I got into law enforcement right when I was in 21. That's actually how I met you. Yep. It was my form of defensive tactics, and that thirst to gain the knowledge it just continued from there. The streets were an every day or every night reminder that you got to stay on top of your skills. So yeah, that's what got me into it.
And it's great that you say that every you have to stay on top of your skills, and people do not know this. And there's a lot of folks that practiced ended up getting a black belt 20, 30 years ago, but they never hit the mat again. And then all of a sudden they think they can still do what they did 20 years ago. Doesn't happen.
No, your body has to constantly be in a state of stress awareness. So you know how to react and deal with because the physical aspect of the fight is one thing, but the aspects of stress response is a completely different animal. And this is, when those aspects of stress response kick in, I'm talking about all the physical distress and the psychological distress that kicks in. People don't see things as they're actually happening. They get that sense of slowness, and everything just kind of grinds to a mode in which, and then afterwards you're like, well, why didn't I do this, or why didn't I do that? I trained and my art failed me. No, your art didn't fail you. It's you haven't put yourself in stress enough to know how to use your art. And a lot of that goes back on the instructors too, Paul, this, and to experience. So they weren't able to draw it out when they needed it.
Absolutely. there was a time frame, especially in the martial arts, that you were tested. Whether you're an instructor, you were tested.
Sure.
And you were tested by other instructors, you were tested by other folks, you were going to be tested. If you're going to be out there teaching martial arts, you were going to be tested. Unfortunately, those tests have been fewer and fewer and far between. And they still exist, and in other countries they exist a little bit more. But here in the States, it has dwindled away. So we've produced a lot of instructors out there, not saying bad, that a knowledge was passed on, but not a experience of knowledge was passed on. Understand what I'm saying?
Well, and to cap that off, the the video era has added to that. I mean, like you and I, as experienced martial artists, we can sit here and trade some ideas through this conference, right?
Sure.
But we're not proving it out. Okay. And there's generations now of instructors and people are paying them money that are solely learned off videos.
Absolutely.
They never left their blood and guts on the dojo floor, and they've never been stress tested in any way whatsoever. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, but that's just the world we live in now. And that just taps right onto what you just said about not putting your art under the stress to see how to work it in that type of situation.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of arts out there, and believe me, every martial art is the best. And like Grandmaster Emperado always said, a person that's good in his basics is a hard man to beat. And that I do take that. And I say that in Kempo. If you're very good in the basics of Kempo, you're going to be very hard to beat.
Right.
Or in boxing or in Savate or what have you. But you have to have those basics. And in today's world, a lot of folks do not want to learn those basics. They want to learn the technique and the flash and everything else comes with it, but they don't want to spend time learning it, conditioning it nonetheless.
They want it fast. We're in a short attention span era, and people want it yesterday. And they want it fast, and they don't care how they get it. Lineage goes hand in hand with everything we're talking about. And we had this discussion yesterday, and that's kind of been swept to the side. I'm proud to say that this is my lineage and these are my mentors.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of people want to be their own creators, so to speak. So they just get the knowledge from all these magnificent sources that we have. But is it really knowledge, or is it just copying? Making a copy of some information that's out there.
Mimicking.
Right.
You're absolutely correct. We all grew up with some great lineage, and especially in Kempo. And I never in my mind would have thought to disrespect that lineage by me losing, whether in the street or in the ring. Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you always have to be on top of that game. Those were the men that you idolized. Those were your mentors that were in front of you. Those were the ones that were teaching you. You weren't going to disrespect them. You might have a bad day and you lose in the ring or what have you, or in the street, you might end up with a black eye, but you weren't going to disrespect them in any form or fashion. So that has died off. That's no longer around. It's still around, but it's no longer around as it was 20, 30 years ago. Easy. So that's what puts us into the sense of when people come in and they say, I just want to learn some self-defense. Let's talk about that broad word of self-defense. As a law enforcement specialist and a law enforcement officer, tell us what self-defense is, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, the law here in Texas gives an individual the right to defend themselves against death or against bodily injury. Okay, and it also gives them the right to defend a third person against the same, against death or bodily injury. And it takes it a step further. It allows you to use deadly force against death or serious bodily injury. Now, deadly force doesn't necessarily mean you're going to take the life of the other person, but it's a force that can result in a serious impairment. Okay, that means a person was hurt really bad. What the law doesn't give you is guidelines in the decision-making process. Okay, and how much force is reasonable versus how much is unreasonable. And that's what an individual needs to be taught through, schools like what we teach and so forth, is that we can teach them in a manner that there's an ethic behind it as well. Because, we've all had the student that's they're hungry to go out and test themselves, and they may go to certain areas or put themselves in situations to actually look for a fight so they can test their skills. Okay, well, that's all fine as long as nobody calls the police when it's over or sues you. Okay, which nowadays in a defensive situation, you have to expect that both of those things are going to happen, because there's no honor anymore.
Absolutely.
So if a criminal comes up to rob you or mug you or breaks into your home to harm your family, and you defend yourself and you seriously hurt that criminal, it seems that nowadays, Paul, that the tide changes, and the one that defended themselves, and rightfully so, a lot of times end up becoming the criminal in the situation, because that's the world we live in now. So everything's got a political background, a political bias to it, is well. So you have to be careful with self-defense, because we have a lot of, and it actually varies from county to county from a legal standpoint. And you have counties that will stand up for their citizens, and then you have counties that, I don't want to say they won't stand up for their citizens, but the criminals seem to have more rights than the citizens do in a particular situation. For instance, in the county that adjoins us right now, they're not even prosecuting people for thefts and burglaries and things of that nature. And during the process, what kind of citizen was going to sit there and actually watch somebody take their property and just think, well, nothing's going to happen to this guy, so I might as well do what I can to try to protect my property, right? But during the process, now they find themselves in hot water as well. So it's a double-edged sword, and there's a lot. It's just like with the license to carry, and the firearm. There's probably 30, I want to say the latest stats, 30% of violent crimes are actually interdicted by citizens now, but we don't get those stats. Okay, so they're doing a lot of good, but these are citizens that are trained and they've gone through the classes, and they did learn that what the law may not teach them, okay, the decision-making process, some of the ethics behind it, okay, when to stop, and how far you can take it, and then all the legal, both civil and criminal aspects of a post situation. So all that's something that I think martial arts instructors are obligated to teach. It wouldn't be, and it may have already happened, but nothing comes to mind, but it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that in a self-defense situation, maybe one of my students or one of yours hurts someone, okay? It may be justified. That's not the point. Everybody's looking for a paycheck, right? And during the process, there's a lawsuit filed by somebody that's attached to the defendant or to the suspect, and we get drug into that, okay? Because this individual was a brown belt or a black belt at our school, and now they're sending us subpoenas to see our curriculum and what's our ethics behind our teaching, and we get drug into it. So I'm not saying that's happening now, but it's not unreasonable by any means.
Right. It can happen, It's just, it hasn't happened as of yet, but it can happen. It just depends on when they're going to bring them in.
Sure it can. It just takes that one case.
Absolutely.
Okay, it takes that one case to start that, because we're just living in a time now where you're almost better to just not be there and get out of the situation without going hands on if possible. And then the other side of it is you never know what someone's going to do to you, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
you may think you're dealing with an empty hand situation and your martial arts gives you the confidence, but now all of a sudden he's produced some type of a weapon, and a knife to a firearm. That's a whole different animal right there. Okay.
And I'm going to tell you right now, martial arts are beautiful, and I respect all the martial arts that there is. But there's martial arts out there that they only teach, as we know in Kempo, where it's an empty hand system. But there's martial arts out there that they teach blades, and it's a bladed system. And you're going to go from day one, and you're going to have a knife in your hand, and you're going to be there 5 to 6, 10 years from now, and you're still going to have a knife in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these martial arts out there that do that are very, very, how can I say, it's just like boxing. You can get very good in a very short period of time.
Right.
And most martial artists, and I tell this and I say it openly, do not have that. It's going to take them a little bit longer time to get those skills. But you can get in boxing and in your escrimas in 6 to 9 months. It's going to take you 2 years in most martial arts schools. You understand?
Sure. And I've always tried to teach that every lesson, Paul, is I want to try to leave the student with something they could use that day if they had to. And when I was a young student, as a kid, I was basically told that it takes years before you can use this, and you just accepted that because we didn't know any better, right? But you tell somebody nowadays that, I'm going to teach you Kempo, for example, and, you'll be good in 5 years. Well, they're out the door, but that's not true either. I mean, and that goes back to the instructor. Okay. If that instructor can't teach a lesson to where the students got something that it's got to be easy to remember, easy to apply, and they got to enjoy doing it and have that positive classroom experience when they walk out of there. If they can't use at least elements of what that lesson, if a situation should arise, sure, it takes thousands of repetitions to get to mastery, but do you have to be a master to learn some basic self-defense? And the answer is no. Now, if we bring a new student in and try to teach them brown and black belt material, because I want to practice my brown and black belt material, so I'm going to teach my low-ranking students that because I'm getting the benefit of going through it, that's just going to overwhelm them. They get frustrated and they're out the door, right? They're like, they're not ready for it. The curriculum was laid out in a progression for a reason. So
you're absolutely correct. And people need to understand that in times, it was time to build muscle memory. It takes time. It takes time. It takes repetition. Some people back then were in the mat every day. Some people nowadays go to a martial art class once a week.
But your masters always start with the basics too. You've already said that. Does a boxer go to the gym and never practice his jab?
No, it's basics from day one.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm the best boxer in the world, but I've got the jab mastered, so I'm not going to do it anymore. But martial artists are guilty of that, right? Yeah. So, and it's like I have an offshoot system that I teach that's Kempo based. It's called COPS, Counteroffensive Personal Protective System, and there's several different. And each lesson is an 8-hour to 10-hour class. It's only based off of 7 strikes. Okay, just 7, because the whole objective behind that is to get some information to someone that they can use, because we teach it a lot to law enforcement and security. Well, there's a lot of cops that get involved in martial arts, but there's a lot of them that don't. Okay, so we've got to teach them something that's usable, that doesn't require. It's not that it says anything requires the mat time, but if you're working for your black belt, it requires a lot more mat time than if you're just trying to develop a system based on 7 strikes, for instance. So we just cut it down in a sense like that so they can, get something that's usable in a shorter amount of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing a lot of people forget is conditioning. You have to condition your hands. You have to condition. And we come from a system that uses hands in many different forms to strike, open
Right.
and closed. And you have to condition them. If you don't condition them and you're building speed, Kempo's a very fast system, and you're building speed and you hit your hand across somebody's cranium, more likely your hand's going to go. And if
Right.
you haven't conditioned it, guess what? Your hand's broken. Now you're in a situation with a broken hand.
Right. Sure. There's been more than one boxer suffer from a boxer's fracture in a bar fight,
Absolutely, yeah.
because they're not used to hitting without the wraps on there and so forth. And it is just, hitting to the head with protection is one thing. So, and without is it's different. So you might want to modify. I said, well, maybe instead of using punches to the head, I might consider using palm strikes because they're less likely to cause an injury to myself. So,
so we have to look at the whole as instructors, and we can continue talking, but folks out there need to understand that in self-defense, there's a lot of elements that fall into self-defense. And number one, they better start learning the law of self-defense. Number one, there's no, go into the penal code and pick up that penal code and understand what self-defense is.
And there's mass information on that. There's case law and a lot of resources to go, starting from the internet, but I would look for legitimate sources, not somebody's
Sure.
blog or something like that, unless you know the background behind them. Do the research. But I always teach the first lesson in self-defense, Paul, is acceptance. On a couple of levels. First of all, the dangers are out there. So you when I worked overseas, I ran into this quite a lot. Is in South America, when I was working with the anti-kidnapping units down there, a lot of the cases that kidnapping cases that would occur, the victims shouldn't have been there in the first place. I mean, all the information is out there that this is the kidnap capital of the world. Why on earth would you go on some kind of a nature expedition, photography, bicycle expedition, whatever, through territory that's known to be controlled by revolutionaries? Why would you do that? Okay. And that's a perfect example of not accepting. And this is information available through embassy websites and numerous sources where you can say it's not safe to be here. Okay. So as a police officer, I don't ask the question anymore because people get offended, but I used to. And so I'd be investigating a crime and it was like, what are you doing here? It's 3:00 in the morning. You got no business being here whatsoever. And now you're involved in this mess. Why aren't you home? And so that's the first thing I teach them. And the other side of acceptance is people need to realize that no matter how much skill and training they get, you're still vulnerable. You want to narrow the odds a little bit, but you're still vulnerable. All the degrees of black belt in the world is not going to keep somebody from stabbing me in the back or shooting me with a weapon. Or I've run across criminals that I've had to take into custody that even with all the training, it's like I'm damn glad I didn't have to fight that individual. Okay, because there's a street element there that your martial arts is every bit as much as the person, if not more the person, than it is the art. And then when you're looking at a hardened felon on the street he's got nothing to lose on one hand, he's got everything that he's gonna lose. People will die for their criminal motivation these days. We see that on the news every day. So you think they're going to go down easy in a street fight? No.
No. No. And people, and I tell this to my students, you want to see how safe the city is wherever you're at. Start following the posts of the newspaper of who got arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Why got arrested. And you're going to see what type of element you're going to end up facing.
Yeah.
And where you're going to end up facing a knife, one or a gun, or multiple attackers. And your training better take you that far and further, because if it doesn't and you don't train, when it happens, that whatever you've already trained in, that's all you got.
Yeah.
So, and if you trust what you got and you haven't been training, good luck to you. But you better start getting up on your game and start training and conditioning every day. Get back on the mat.
Right.
And I tell this to all the black belts out there that are running around and all the advanced students out there: get back on the mat. Get back on the mat.
Now it's a shame we've got more career criminals running around on the streets than we've ever had before. And that's a topic for another day right there. We could talk about that forever, but that's part of that acceptance is you've got to know. But Paul, the majority of our students that we've taught over the years, if they most of them are good people, okay, and they've got money to come in and pay for classes and so forth, and they there's a part when the self-defense becomes a byproduct, and now they're hooked on the art, okay, and that's okay. It's like in Kempo, we've got 200 and some odd techniques to get you to black belt. Do we need 200 and some odd techniques in a street fight? But there's the martial artist side of it. Okay. It's almost like I want to say, I want to make a career out of this. Okay. Not professionally speaking, but just personally. Okay. Sure. And so it constantly gives you a new mode of study, so you can take it to the next level and the next level and the next level. And that's where the self-defense just becomes a byproduct, and people are doing it for, the personal growth that we see that they obtain. I mean, there's a huge sense of accomplishment when a person obtains a rank in a school from an instructor that he's established a lineage with, a relationship, because they're receiving something that's been passed down through ancestors of the art, correct? And now they're part of that lineage, and that's something that nobody will ever take away from them. And that's what I try to tell people, that you can't get that through an online or a video source. I mean, I'm sure that's better than nothing, but when we started, we didn't have videos and we didn't know what we were going to learn until the instructor introduced us to that material. And that was fascinating, wasn't it? It's like, I wonder what's this next belt's going to unfold for me. I wonder what tonight's technique is going to be like, because we didn't know, so we had all that anticipation built up and everything. And so that's the side of the martial art where you really get to see the people grow. And the self-defense is going to get better, but as their confidence goes up, they're less likely to get into a street altercation.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. We've had a lot of great students that come in. A lot of them become family. A lot of them become an extended family. The friendships are still there. Some of them leave because of life, but they still call you up, and they're still around. And that's what it's the community that ends up coming out of a school.
Right.
And what happens is with we can talk about it later, but I'm just going to mention it. And what happened with the COVID year, a lot of these icon schools that were around for a long time just disappeared.
Sure.
They're not coming back up again. And it's sad, because it created a lot of people within that community, teachers, coaches, firemen, policemen, doctors, nurses. A lot of those young men and women that are taking those professions at one time or another passed through those schools that were icon schools. Mm-hmm. Whether it was 3 months or 6 months or a year, they took something with them.
No, they're I've got a black belt down in Columbia, And while I was down there, we opened a school down there, and it was doing quite well. The only Kempo school in Bogota, in the whole country, as far as I know, because when I started it, there was nobody teaching Kempo down there. So I've got Pastor down there. I've recently promoted him to fourth, and COVID completely killed his. And it's not anything that he could have done about it, because it wasn't the students not wanting to come in and train. It was the restrictions put on them by the city, the inspectors, and so forth. So they're shutting down these businesses that have any kind of person-to-person contact, and it was not good for martial arts in a lot of places. I don't think so much here. Yeah, there were some restrictions here, but a lot of the schools found workarounds. As yourself, you're still moving on. But yeah, there were a lot of doors that closed because the instructors just said I had enough. I can't win this battle. I can't pay my rent and charge students that I don't have anymore to try to make that. So yeah, it was a tough time.
That's what happened in Brazil as well. My wife's from Brazil. We've got the Salat Club over there as well. We have a Kempo club down there.
Outstanding.
It just died. It just died out. It died out because of that. And now they're calling back. When are you going to come back? And when can you help? And hopefully in 2023 we can go back out there and start pushing it forward. But we need to. Not only that, the ones here as well. And we need more. How can I say? Students. A lot. This is what happens a lot. Students go and they move out and they say, you know what, I'm not going to go anywhere else. I'm going to wait my 4 years in college and then come back to the school. Well, that's not going to happen. But there's other schools in Austin, there's other schools in Dallas, and you can refer them to, especially because there's good people teaching out there. There's some good martial artists teaching martial arts out there, especially in Kempo. And we can always find out somebody that's teaching Kempo or not, if they're doing it. And we have an associate one that we can refer somebody to when they move that way,
Right.
And people need to understand that if you want to continue in the art, you can continue with the art with somebody else when you moved out somewhere else, especially if you're a young belt.
Right. And worst case scenario is you find another system. You might not be able to find Kempo where you're at, but maybe there's a reputable Kaja Kempo school there. And, although there's going to be some differences, you're not going to be on foreign territory, so to speak.
Sure.
And there's always a way to continue on, but, people get the attention span is shorter these days, Paul. And once they're out of it for a while, it's easy to get pulled into something else. It used to be that it was hard to keep kids because there was so much competition to keep kids in your school, not with other martial arts schools. I mean, with other activities for children. And then you throw these in there now. The kids don't want to leave these long enough to go to a class, right? Well, I'm finding that the same applies for adults also. So we just live in that fast-paced world that if we don't get that hook set, then if there is a break in the action, the interest is lost.
Absolutely.
So you got to keep them hooked that way.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for coming out and talking to us, and especially giving us some light on on an experience point of view. Okay. And because we've always respected you in that sense, and it's like your family, that's just the way it is.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. So I don't know if the folks know, but I was a police officer in Irving when Paul had his school there in South Irving, and I used to drive by, park my squad out there, and you had your garage door up and sit there and watch your class for a while. And back in that day, it was there was a kind of a camaraderie between us martial artists. It never a sense of competition,
Right.
Never a sense of competition. We it's like we were all friends, and
Yes.
So forth. And it was good times.
Absolutely.
Good times. But it's good to see that you've stuck by it yourself because, decades going on, and that's rare in a man these days to stay with it that long. So I applaud you for keeping your and what you've done with the Hall of Fame also has been a major contribution.
Thank you. I don't know if I can. Let me see if I can switch this open for you to see the other side of part of the walls. Let me see. Would this switch it over? I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
We have run out of space, but it's still there. Yours is up there as well.
Well, I need to get down there because I don't, in my opinion, it's not official till I get there. So the R word is being floated around, Paul. I'm talking retirement. I got 40 years in now, so that's going to open me up to be a lot more active in things outside of just the law enforcement side of teaching, but still, running a full-time job. I'm a supervisor. I'm a sergeant at my agency. They keep me plenty busy. And, with the shifts that we work, 1 week I have 2 days off and the next week I have 5 days off. So I still do a lot of teaching, but, I'm subject to call out too, because I'm still the deputy SWAT commander and I pretty much do all the raid planning and run the ops. So I get called, my phone could ring right now and I'm on my day off, but it's not a day off anymore. So it's kind of hard to let it go. Since this was more of a talk about self-defense, the streets have been my teacher, all the same. Not that I didn't get my tactics and techniques from my mentors, but being in law enforcement has been a learning experience beyond what I ever imagined when I first got into it as a 20-year-old kid. So it's kind of hard to cut loose from that,
Absolutely. And thank you for your service, and you've done an excellent job since back then. And people do not know that the streets we live in, it's cruel in a sense, but it's still the streets, still reality. And you can learn a lot from them. Some people grew up in them. Some people walked through them. Some people avoided them. But if you're in the streets, it's going to give you a different respect to what happens in the street, especially if you go into the martial arts. You start seeing it from a different perspective, and you start seeing it for what the martial arts were designed for, which
Right.
were to protect people in the streets, and people do not understand that, whether it was in Hawaii, whether it was in California, whether it was in Paris, whether it was in Tokyo, wherever it was designed, it was designed to walk in those streets.
Right. It wasn't designed for fun. It was designed for survival.
Exactly. And people can't get, how can I put it? You can't forget that.
That's our roots,
Yeah.
that's our roots. And, for me, Kempo has been, like I said, it's been my main form of defensive tactics as a law enforcement officer as well. So that's always been the number one. That's why they said, Tim, why don't you go to tournaments anymore? It's like, well, after I had a few street fights, it's somebody trying to take my weapon away, or 4 or 5 attackers taking you down and things of that nature, where you kind of lose it's a different element, and it's like there's no element of life and death in a tournament. You're going to go home at the end of the day, and working a shift and having a confrontation out on the streets, or even as a civilian being involved in a serious assault, you don't know that. A different mentality. Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you for that, and we're going to go ahead and we'll continue. We'll do it again. We'll think of another topic, and we'll come back and talk about it and kind of reference it, and for folks out there, more for educational purposes anyway. And the folks, if you got something out of this, click like, click share it out, especially if you're a martial artist, because listen to other martial artists. It might give you a different point of view, or something that you might have overlooked or forgotten, and say, you know what, I have to bring that back again, because number one, we're all here to help each other out. We want everybody to excel. That's the way I look at things.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Thank you. And we'll leave you everybody with this. Be safe, stay safe, and everybody at peace.
Appreciate it.